Explosive news from South Korea. According to the South Korean newspaper, Chosun Ilbo, on the afternoon of August 26, local time, large-scale rallies were held in Seoul by South Korean environmental and citizen groups, as well as four major opposition parties, condemning Japan's determination to discharge contaminated water from Fukushima into the ocean. They urged Japan to revoke the decision to discharge into the sea and criticized the Yoon Suk-yeol government for its accommodating attitude on this matter, demanding immediate action from the South Korean government. After the rally, protesters marched towards the South Korean presidential residence. Historically, Koreans have been known for their extremism, with a prevailing small country, few people mentality that occasionally leads to more aggressive actions. For instance, in previous years, some individuals even protested against Japan by cutting off their own fingers. However, there have been fewer incidents like these in recent years, and it seems that Koreans have lost their spirit. Even the Yoon Suk-yeol government has gone so far as to align with the Japanese government's decisions, neglecting historical and territorial issues and even expressing support for Japan's discharge of nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean, despite being a maritime nation. Yoon Suk-yeol is a pro-American government propped up by the United States. While his actions can be understood, what is incomprehensible is the entire Korean society allowing Yoon Suk-yeol's government to do as it pleases, especially when the opposition parties remain silent. At present, Yoon Suk-yeol's government policies have not only pushed South Korea to the brink of war but have also tolerated grave matters that jeopardize South Korea's survival, such as Japan's disposal of nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. In this context, has Korean society really not reacted at all? This reaction finally emerged on the afternoon of August 26. The leader of the largest opposition party in South Korea, the Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, along with other parties, citizen groups, and environmental organizations, have finally taken a stand against the South Korean government. Although this response comes a bit late, it at least shows that the Korean people still have some spirit and a sense of self-preservation. This is South Korea's last chance for self-preservation. It's not an exaggeration to say that if there is no internal movement within South Korea, and if the Yoon Suk-yeol government is allowed to continue its recklessness, the country will likely head towards ruin in the future. If the United States fails to contain China in the Western Pacific and is forced to leave East Asia, who will support South Korea at that time? Especially when North Korea's nuclear missiles can reach the mainland United States. Does South Korea, playing the role of a vanguard in the struggle between China and the US, still have a chance? Who can save South Korea then? When that time comes, North Korea will undoubtedly unify the southern part, and South Korea will become a part of North Korea, and the peninsula will be reunited. For China, once the United States fails to contain China and withdraws from East Asia, due to North Korea's important role in this scenario, there will be no legal, emotional, or moral reasons to oppose the reunification of North and South. By then, South Korea's only fate will be destruction. The ones to suffer the most from South Korea's destruction will not be its ordinary citizens, but these politicians. Many of them will face reckoning. The elite politicians in South Korea will not have a favorable outcome. Conversely, if South Korea doesn't play the role of the US's vanguard against China, it won't completely offend China. The situation on the peninsula won't be as tense, and even if North Korea intends to unify, it lacks moral and practical support. In the future, both sides might exist independently or even unite. If the latter scenario occurs through negotiations, South Korea's elite politicians can retain their political status and secure their interests. Therefore, for South Korea, they must save themselves. Otherwise, when the conflict on the peninsula ignites, South Korea won't even have the chance to save itself. The United States has been promoting the East Asian NATO alliance between the United States, Japan, and South Korea for about 2 decades. Progress was initially made during the end of the Lee Myung-bak administration, but it was reversed during the early period of the Park Geun-hye administration. The alliance among the United States, Japan, and South Korea did not make any progress during Moon Jae-in's 5-year term. It was precisely due to the lack of progress that the inexperienced Yoon Suk-yeol was propped up by the United States. With U.S. support, Yoon Suk-yeol quickly gained popularity by sending 2 former presidents to prison, which brought Korea into a dangerous situation. In the past, South Korea's primary method of countering the U.S.-led U.S. Japan-South Korea alliance was anti-Japanese sentiment. Through historical issues, territorial disputes, and various other reasons, South Korea generated internal opposition to the U.S. Japan-South Korea alliance. Consequently, the U.S. objective remained unfulfilled. So, how did the Yoon Suk-yeol government aid the United States in promoting the U.S. Japan-South Korea alliance after coming to power? The approach was to resolve historical issues first. With the United States behind the scenes and under Yoon Suk-yeol's leadership, South Korea and Japan reached a reconciliation on historical issues. This reconciliation removed the major obstacle to the U.S. Japan-South Korea alliance. Now, the U.S. Japan-South Korea alliance is established, and South Korea has become the front line of the U.S.-China power struggle. According to this trajectory, if conflicts between the U.S. and China escalate, a war on the Korean peninsula is almost inevitable. Once war erupts on the Korean peninsula, South Korea's future is bleak, and the likelihood of national extinction is high. At such a critical moment, who can save South Korea? Only South Korea itself. Only the opposition parties in South Korea, by pressuring the Yoon Suk-yeol government from within and eventually replacing it, can ensure South Korea's complete security. South Korea has little space and time left. Historical issues have been reconciled between Japan and South Korea, and even the opposition parties in South Korea lack a solid foothold. What can be done? At this juncture, Japan provided an opportunity by callously releasing nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean, disregarding the common interests of humanity and neighboring countries. For South Korea, this is a chance to distance itself from Japan. If this opportunity is not seized, South Korea's future looks extremely bleak. This time, the four major opposition parties in South Korea and over 90 citizen groups gathered more than 60,000 people. However, this scale is still far from enough. A larger scale and greater effort are required. The leader of the largest opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, and former presidential candidate, strongly criticized Japan for crossing an insurmountable boundary, and said that discharging nuclear-contaminated water into the ocean is a declaration of war against the countries along the Pacific coast. While his statements are forceful, it is crucial for the Korean people to collectively acknowledge this sentiment, and this will take time. The actions taken by South Korea's opposition parties in response to Japan's disposal of nuclear-contaminated water might be somewhat late, but it's a case of better late than never. Anti-Japanese sentiment is a strategic gap China uses to break through U.S. suppression. As the U.S. seeks to contain China, Japan stands as the strongest fortress in East Asia and a core pivot for attacking China. Therefore, in negotiations with the U.S., Japan's demands are quite high, including the disposal of nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. To maintain its global hegemony and suppress China, the U.S. supports Japan's discharge of nuclear-contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean, even at the cost of harming global interests. To some extent, this significant event jeopardizing global security is a blatant trade between the U.S. and Japan. The United States engaging in such a trade with Japan is already a moral defeat. In reality, it's not that other countries don't oppose it. Rather, many countries are reluctant to openly oppose it due to U.S. support. For instance, Western countries have been pressured by the U.S., and countries in East Asia, including Southeast Asia, view this matter as distant from themselves. Coupled with U.S. pressure, they are hesitant to vehemently oppose it. As a result, China, Russia, and North Korea strongly oppose it, while other nations echo the sentiment, but their opposition to Japan's discharge is not forceful enough. China has already implemented a comprehensive ban on Japanese seafood. Even excluding China's vast market of 1.4 billion people, the panic over nuclear wastewater pollution has also spread within Japan. The route of relying on increased domestic sales of Japanese seafood is not feasible. This year, Japan's seafood market is destined to suffer significant losses. What's truly surprising, however, is that Yoon Suk-yeol, a leader in South Korea known for being pro-Japan, personally visited a seafood market and deliberately purchased Japanese seafood to assure the South Korean public that Japanese seafood is safe. However, the South Korean public isn't buying into this narrative. Large-scale protests have erupted across the streets as people strongly oppose Japan's discharge of nuclear-contaminated water into the ocean. Concurrently, South Korea's seafood market is facing a catastrophic collapse. Numerous citizens have joined in the movement to boycott Japanese seafood. For Japan, which insists on discharging nuclear wastewater into the sea regardless of international opposition. If the populations of neighboring countries also join the boycott of Japanese seafood, Japan's seafood industry is bound to face a catastrophic collapse this year. The above are just internet views and do not represent the position of this channel. What are your views? We sincerely look forward to seeing your comments. If you like this channel, remember to like and follow it. Thank you for your support.